So in Syria, there's a site called Ain Dara. I want you to take a look at this.
All right, corner of the screen.
Now, do you remember when we were the telltale sign from the Ararat civilization of Lake Vaughan? They were building with basalt. Do you remember? Basalt is volcanic. It's very hard.
Yes.
It's a telltale sign. Ain Dara is built entirely out of basalt. Entirely. The entire thing. Now, what does it say down there in the next to the star?
Destroyed in Turkey in 28.
Destroyed by Turkey, Turkish government.
Erdogan destroyed this.
Turkey, the Turkish government accidentally dropped a bomb on Ain Dara and destroyed the entire site before we could study it. Before we could study it. It's gone.
It's
It's gone.
None of this.
It's all gone. They destroyed it before we could study it.
God damn you.
Let me see that for a second. So, there's your lion. There's your lion from Sumer.
Yeah.
And from Turkey. It's right there. And there's your basalt. And they have an ancient king list that connects back too. Not only that, but it's supposedly the same bloodline that we were described in that list.
All right, time out for 1 minute.
Yes.
I got to go to the bathroom. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. Pick up where you left off. Thank you.
So one of the aspects of this that we were talking about that was so sad is that this incredible site called Ain Dara in Syria, not only is it unlike anything else in that region, but before we were able to even study it, the Turkish government destroyed it in 2018 as an accident, they state. Now, what's so crazy about this place is that when they first discovered it, they found this multi-ton, massive basalt lion buried, and that's the only reason they found it was because his head was sticking above the ground. It was like under these layers of soil. And they realized that the entire temple was built out of basalt. And as far as they know, there's very few places in the world that you can even see that because basalt is so hard. It's such a hard material to work with, but it mimics the same use of basalt that we find at the Lake Vaughan Ararat civilization. With Kavis Tepe and Kef Kalesi, they only used basalt there. And it's interesting that we're finding the same lion depictions and the same depictions from that region all of a sudden that we are here, showing you evidence of the way they went. Basically, if you imagine that these sons and these sages, these creators of these civilizations, are creating something and then moving on. And that's exactly what we're seeing here, is that the same iterations that had led to the creation of the Lake Vaughan, Kavis Tepe, and Zernaki Tepe, and Kef Kalesi, those influences moved here. And they had the same architecture, same style, same everything. But now it's all the way southwest in Syria, right? But what are we getting close to? We're getting close to the Mediterranean. And that's what's really interesting about this, is that by using these sites, we're now able to link the path they took, which matches exactly with those bloodline charts, supposedly, of where these family members went, okay? Now, so based on that, it means that we can take and associate the fact that this entire region was the same influences that moved westward. But we had some different influences as well, and I want to show that. The second place in Syria that pops up that connects all this is something that I've been studied for a good 6 or 8 months because it's a fascinating place, and again, nobody talks about it. I don't know why. It's called Ebla. And in Ebla, Syria...
How do you spell that?
Ebla.
Okay.
And one of the reasons it's overlooked is that we see the classic examples in Ebla of very, very primitive work on top, just like we see everywhere else in the world, but then sections of it are these ancient bases. And I have images of that here. I don't know if you're going to be able to really find that, but basically what we're seeing is two completely distinct types of architecture. And I don't know if you want to look, especially this one, look at the big blocks versus the small crude stuff on top. Tell me if you can...
Corner of the screen for this as well.
Can you notice the difference between those two?
Yes, one is like rounded, like
big, large blocks.
rocks. The other one is those blocks similar to this.
Similar to Zernaki Tepe as well.
Yeah.
So we see that, yes, the megalithic building is there. And if anything, it actually looks more like Zernaki Tepe than Kavis Tepe, which is weird. So what I'm trying to say is, Ebla, Syria isn't that far from Ain Dara. But the thing is that Zernaki Tepe, the way that they constructed those blocks, looks very similar to Ebla. Whereas Kavis Tepe and Kef Kalesi, again, the same region, look like Ain Dara, showing you that the influences from there diverged. They started going to different parts of the world, but they were in the same area to start, is what I'm saying. How that came about, I don't know. I don't know why one group would prefer to build slightly different than another, and then like why one would be only want to do basalt. Like, so there's questions we don't know. We don't know why they made the decisions they did, but what connects and syncs this whole thing is that the second largest library ever found in the ancient world, besides the Ashurbanipal library we talked about, was in Ebla. Now, in Ebla, they found what's called the Royal Library and King's List. And in that, they found ancient writings in their library that were Sumerian, Babylonian, Turkish from this area, Armenian area. They found Cyprus writings from the Mediterranean, and they found writings from Egypt. I think even Greek too. Everything. Right there. Why? Well, you go into Ebla and you look it up, you find out that it was like this center of the old world where to get to the Mediterranean, you had to pass through Ebla. And then to get to the Black Sea and then the Lake Von, you had to go through Ebla because clearly everybody was traveling through the Mediterranean. Obviously, maritime travel was very significant.
Right.
So Ebla was like the crossing of all of this. And we have all the writings there in that journal. In the library. They're all there. And so Ebla, if you look at a map, Ebla is right before the Mediterranean. Like, phew. Meanwhile, right next to Ebla in Lebanon, we find the emergence of gigantic megaliths that look like Ebla but bigger. They look very similar, the type of stone, the type of ways they made the work. The influences of the Ebla architecture is right there in Lebanon, whereas the influences of the more volcanic basalt goes to somewhere else. It's like you can see they're moving around and they're adopting certain sites and they're creating things as they go, right? So as we go along, we learn that Ebla leads to the land of Canaan, which is supposedly where the last of the giants were, and the whole connection to the Book of Enoch. Then we go a little bit further. What we find is that we have done genetic studies of these elongated skulls. Have you seen this?
No.
So in Egypt, we've found some elongated skulls related to Akhenaten. And then we also found elongated skulls in Peru at a place called Paracas. Okay? As well as the elongated skulls we're referring to are not based on cranium enlargement. So they were like mimicking. It looks like what we're finding around the world is I have one on here if you want to look at it.
Yeah, let me see.
That's Brian Forster right there. He was one of the curators of the museum at Paracas. Good friend of mine and a great researcher.
So this is a real skull that looks like that?
Yeah. So what they found was not only did they find it there, but this is those other versions of humans I told you about. This is what they were if you want to know. This is what those bloodlines and what they were. So what we found is that we not only find similar architecture in Peru that we find in the Lake Von area, but you ready for this? Not only did Brian Forster and Lloyd Pye do genetic testing on the Paracas skulls, but the TV network I work for, Gaia, did an entire showcase where they genetically tested them as well. Through all these genetic studies, they found the same results. The genetics of the Paracas skulls from Peru came from the Armenian Black Sea area of Lake Von. And they found elongated skulls in a place called Malta in the Mediterranean on an island. And in the hypogeum, this chamber that's basically designed to 432 hertz human consciousness, they found elongated these aren't just one elongated skull. They're like a graveyard of elongated skulls. And they found them in Paracas. And so they genetically test the ones in Paracas, Peru, to test back to this Lake Von area near the Black Sea. Then they test another whole part of the world in the Mediterranean. And they test at Malta with this, incredibly, if anyone's ever seen the Oracle Chamber in the Hypogeum of Malta, it's like amazing. The way they designed it's beautiful. The skulls, they found elongated skulls there, and they genetically traced them to the exact same spot. Lake Von, in the Armenian highlands of the Mount Ararat region. Both places, across the world, similar architecture, trace back to the same spot. That's why, if we think of the story of the Atrahasis, bringing it back, this bloodline king that's like a demigod that's living like huge amounts of time, lands on Mount Ararat. Everybody else is mostly gone. There was another group I told you about at Kish with Etana. That's a there was like two areas that sort of reemerged again, right? But so just go back to Lake Von for a minute. So think about it. He's this like superhuman that's like a demigod with a bloodline that these three sons go out, and then we find the same architecture, same gods all around the world, same influences, as well as the genetic exact identity of these locations back to the same place, which matches all the bloodlines, biblical bloodlines we showed you.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.